In this training session, we're going to take a look at the administration of the heartbeat monitor. You can find the heartbeat monitor here with the heart icon, of course. And the first thing you'll notice on the top there is the monitoring interval. So this is how often the remote hosts are going to be queried. 60 seconds is the default. You can lower that. You can make that higher. The number here really depends on how accurate you want results to be. If you don't care to get a notification or wait 5 minutes for a notification, then you can also set this to 300 seconds, for example. And right below you see the thread management. So here we can see that the heartbeat monitor obviously is using multiple threads, because if you're monitoring a large number of hosts, let's say 500, then it wouldn't be possible to scan all those 500 hosts with a single thread sequentially. So the heartbeat monitor uses multiple threads, and here you configure the maximum number that you want the heartbeat monitor to use. You can increase that, of course, if you want to use more threads, if it's too slow. If you notice that it takes more than 60 seconds to monitor all of your hosts, then you can increase that number. And you can also set it to manual if you want to force the heartbeat agent to use a certain number of threads. In most cases, that's not really necessary, and the automatic setting works as well. But keep in mind that you can increase the number of threads if you have a lot of hosts. So if you're monitoring, let's say 5,000 hosts, well, then you may want to increase the number of threads to something higher than 50. Manage MIBs will bring us back to the network services dialog that's shared between the heartbeat agent and the network services. So the heartbeat agent also uses SNMP to retrieve certain information from the remote hosts, so such as disk space, hardware information, network cards, things like that. So it uses SNMP for that. So in order for that SNMP information to show up correctly with the correct SNMP OID names, then the name is being resolved, then you can configure the MIBs here. Sometimes hosts have issues with SNMP. SNMP may be unavailable, it's too slow. So this checkbox basically here, which is on by default, means that if the heartbeat agent is contacting a remote host by SNMP and it keeps failing, then it will basically stop trying. The problem with SNMP is a UDP-based protocol, so it's not always obvious to the heartbeat agent whether it was an error or just a timeout, for example. So this is why this checkbox exists, because SNMP doesn't just return a hard error. Now let's move on to the alerting options. So when an issue is detected, in this case we're talking about a ping error or TCP error. If you're monitoring TCP ports, then here we're logging an error when it's positive, meaning that it came back from a error state, and of course also an error when it goes into an error state. And when a host or port is down, the heartbeat agent will log an event every 12 hours. You can reduce that. If you say, you know what, when a host is down, this is very critical to me, I want to get notified every 15 minutes, then you can adjust that time period. If the agent is unavailable, so as I explained in the network services video, all the alerting, the forwarding of events is going to be done by the local agent. So the heartbeat agent doesn't actually send out any email alerts. Instead, it's the local agent that does that. So, but if the local agent, of course, is stopped, then that would be a problem, because when the local agent is stopped, you will not get any email alerts, for example, or any other type of alerts. So the heartbeat agent essentially monitors the local agent on this machine, and if it is stopped, it will send an email. Newer versions of EventSentry can also retrieve some information, such as running daemons on non-Windows machines via SSH, and you can configure the default SSH port here. So if you're using something other than 22, you can configure that here. Finally, of course, we have logging to the database. So here is where we configure the database where we're storing all of our heartbeat status information. You'll have a number of reports, but the main ones would just be the current status of your hosts, which hosts are up, which hosts are not, and history. So here we configure this. And here we can, on the very bottom, you can control the heartbeat agents, stop the service, restart it, set it to manual, configure the debug level, and so forth. Utilize collector is available for scenarios where you have a remote collector and you have multiple heartbeat agents running that do not have direct access to the database. So on a default on-premise installation, the heartbeat agent is usually going to run either on the same computer where the built-in database is, or at least on the same network, meaning the heartbeat agent will have direct access to this primary database. If it does not, For example, let's say you're an MSP, you have a number of customers, they each have their own EventSentry installation, but they don't have access to the database. Then you can route Heartbeat traffic through the collector. So that's what that checkbox would do.